Hello, and welcome to Talking Toddlers, where I share more than just tips and tricks on how to reduce tantrums or build your toddler's vocabulary. We're going to cover all of that, I assure you. But here, our goal is to develop clarity, because in this modern world, it's truly overwhelming, especially during these past 2 years. This podcast is about empowering moms to know the difference between fact and fiction, to never give up, to tap into everyday activities so your child stays on track. He's not falling behind, he's thriving through your guidance. We know that true learning starts at home, and Talking Toddlers, this podcast helps you develop that with clarity, confidence, and clear communication. So let's get started. Hello, and welcome back to Talking Toddlers. I'm Erin Heyer, your host. And this week, we're going to begin the topic of 12 easy tips to help increase your toddler's talking and listening at home. And before we get started, I just want to kind of give you a little heads up that I've dived deep into this area because over the last several months, I've had several calls every week, as well as a few neighbors and colleagues talk to me about referring their child as a COVID baby, that their 18-month or their 24-month child isn't talking as much, because they're a COVID baby. And that really concerns me because I just think that although childhood looks very different at this stage in our world, and that things have been turned upside down throughout lockdowns and all the limited outings, and as the fog of the pandemic was lifted, and children started going back to school and having more regular play dates, there was a significant struggle. And whether it came from the children themselves or the stress that the family had been going through, or the stress that we still are dealing with at large in the community. I just think it's really, really important that I share with you. It doesn't mean that we have to, quote unquote, accept all of this as a new normal. Child development, early speech and language development, attention, cognition, self-regulation, social, emotional regulation cannot be flipped upside down because we as a world were cut off from each other. My point here is that please don't accept this as a new normal or natural or healthy. It's not. And yes, children are resilient. Yes, we can rely on neuroplasticity and hope that all of this growth and development comes together naturally. But I am here. This purpose of this podcast is to help all toddlers and for all new parents, whether you're a mom or a dad or a grandparent, to understand that you are in the driver's seat, that no matter what you had to go through with your family and with your little one, that you can shape this and build a healthy, natural, normal, robust, thriving child through your guidance. So I just want to kind of highlight that everything I recommend or suggest or share on this podcast can be applied to all children, whether you have a diagnosis, whether you're just beginning to understand that talking and listening and learning and growing takes specific direction, right? Even though we are wired as human beings to learn how to talk and communicate with one another, that we're wired to do that naturally, it still takes practice. It takes opportunity day in and day out with you, whether you're just a family of a mom and a dad, or a parent and a child, or you have extended family, that it takes specific direction and time for your child to wire his or her brain and create these neural pathways to build their natural language. And then that language is the foundation to all life learning. And I've said this over and over again, but it starts at home with you guys. So just so you understand my purpose of this podcast that I started thinking about and planning in 2019 before the pandemic, because I saw new moms in my practice over 35 years struggle, that parents and grandparents were struggling more and more and more as our modern world became more and more complex, and that toddlers were struggling, and the systems that we were relying on, the school systems, the medical systems, even the communities at large, were breaking down. We're no longer able to support the needs of the children and the families. And so my purpose here is to shed light on all the natural ways that new moms can navigate this modern world, establish healthy routines, and that they can build a language-rich home. And I use that, or my industry kind of uses that term quite a bit. What does a language-rich home environment mean? What the heck does that mean? And so I just want to put a little kind of subcategory on this, that long before technology, long before lockdowns or even preschool centers became the everyday life, or focused play groups, or any of these things, kids, our babies, our toddlers, were raised at home. They were taught at home, and they grew and developed their skills at home. And so when I talk about a language-rich home life, it means that we're taking the best of both worlds. That technology is wonderful. This is how I'm reaching you and I can communicate as the adults. But it's really, for the babies and the toddlers and the preschoolers, it's really natural home development that you, mom, dad, grandparents, extended family members, do day in and day out with everyday activities, everyday life, help them develop their human natural skills, which include human communication, movement, play, socialization, at home with you. And that language-rich environment means that we have to spend time, purposeful time, directed time, present time, meaning that we're not distracted by the technology and the to-do list, that we are in it with our child in these little snippets as well as extended periods, so they can build their human communication and relationship and attachment with us. So when they're ready to go out into the big bad world that we kind of have created, hard to navigate, but that they're ready and equipped to sit and listen and negotiate and play and laugh and learn with ease, with comfort, with some struggle, because I've talked about, that we are designed, if everything was easy, then we'd be bored and we wouldn't really achieve anything novel or new or rich. But that we need repetition, 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 and then we need to be tested. We need to be pushed. We need to be expected. And that starts from your baby learning how to roll over, your baby learning how to crawl, your baby learning how to chew and eat food that supports natural speech and language development, and your toddler learning how to climb up the ladder and go down the slide. All of these things are wonderful play-based, family-rich, child-centered activities that take work and effort and practice, and they begin to hone them over and over again. So with that, what I have kind of outlined is a whole list, 12 easy tips to help increase your toddler's talking and listening at home with you. And we will dive deep into a number of these. The first one that I want to start with this week, I think it'll be a series, at least 3 episodes. I want you to understand some of the background on the beginning of this list. So you, as the mom, as the dad, as the primary caretaker, can really come to the table with a robust understanding of how important these tips are, and yet how easy they are, that you're probably doing many of them naturally. I want to shed some light onto them, maybe expand them, as well as give you that background information so you know why you're doing what you're doing, and then you keep doing it more and more. So the number one, we need to model for our children. And I think that this can be kind of misunderstood or misdirected for lots of reasons, but you may have heard it as narration or self-talk. And what I want to hone in today is how important it is, but that there are subtle differences, that there are these subtle nuances that are key. And it's important that we find that sweet spot, that we don't talk too much over our kid, and they really, and I think I mentioned this kind of scenario a couple of episodes ago, that if we talk too much and overwhelm them with auditory information, they tune us out. And we actually then end up training them not to pay attention to our voice, right? And so I do think it's important to kind of step back and give you a little backstory, because it really unfolded as I walked into this field, about 35 years ago. And it was based on this really dynamic research that came out of the early 1990s by these 2 researchers, Betty Hart and Todd Risley. And its nickname is called the 30 million word gap. And so you may have heard it through that title, but the real research was titled Meaningful Differences in the Everyday Experience of Young American Children. And I think that there was a lot of good insight that came out of this kind of, for that day and time, complex longitudinal study. And yet, like always, us humans tend to, take certain threads of the outcome and then exploit it, really, or misrepresent it. Perhaps not on purpose, but it sort of gets overgeneralized and then out of proportion. So what's interesting is that recent published research kind of brings a different light to the story, and that there are now some questions being raised, which I think is good, because for me, as a clinician, as kind of a science geek, that I think it's important for us to ask questions, and that especially when we have one large study that's been kind of in the forefront for a long time, for about 27 years, we need to revisit it. We live in a different world than we did back in the 1990s. Truth be told, I got my very first computer back then. It cost me like $10,000. It was, pretty much just a fancy typewriter, but technology has taught us, or technology has given us the tools to learn more, to record and measure and assess development and behavior in many, many different facets. And so I think it's very important that we revisit the impressions of any longstanding held belief and revisit and perhaps expand upon, is this still applicable today? And what have we learned over the last 2.5 decades? So in a nutshell, what Hart and Riesly found was that children and toddlers, babies and toddlers, who were raised in a quote-unquote rich language home environment seemed to fare much better academically, socially, and emotionally. The interesting part is that they really focused on lower socioeconomic and upper or professional groups of people. But if you dive deep into their analysis of not only the two major categories, but the subcategories of these different families, that there was a significant difference in the number and the quality of words spoken with the baby and toddler. So how this study came up with a 30 million word gap was that children who were raised with more verbal mothers, in this case, seemed to do much better later on in preschool and academics than those whose parents spoke less. And there was a 30 million word gap, 32 to be exact, that a 3-year-old heard 32 million less words in those first 36 months. But the interesting part when we dove deep into these subcategories was that it wasn't just the socioeconomic status, nor was it the number of words, but the quality. And so there were many cases where a mom who was on assistance was much more verbal and much more engaged. And those children did just as well as the upper, more quote unquote professional family, that if they weren't chatty Cathys, or if they weren't engaging with a child, or if they used more directives, which were more like, no, stop touching that plant, versus, yes, that's a green plant. We look at plants, don't touch. That's the plant for looking. And so there's a difference between just giving a directive, no, don't touch, versus a language-rich exchange as you redirect the child's hand or walk them away or wave to the plant. You're still talking about it in a positive affirmation. So the interesting part when you really dive deep into this study, and I've known this for a couple of decades, was that it's really the quality and the engagement that the family has with the babies and the toddlers that matters most, not necessarily the number of words, and certainly not just this strict bifurcation of, lower socioeconomic families talk less to their kids than the upper echelon do. And so I think it's really, really important that we step back and we look at the bigger picture. And so that's where there has been a couple of newer studies that aren't directly 100% replications of the first one, as a 30 million word gap, but they're beginning to explain a little bit more that it is the quality, it is the type of language-rich environment that matters most, and not necessarily the number of words. And so when I talk about modeling with your baby and your toddler, it's really, really important that we understand what the heck does that mean, right? That it's not just reading the newspaper, because that was always the joke, right? And you can do that. I've mentioned that before. You can do that with your newborn if you want. It's charming. I think we all have. But the truth is, to model for them is that you're speaking with them in everyday activities, that you're giving your life a voice, and that you speak in short, direct phrases, and that your 1, 2, 3-year-olds are learning language and the understanding of the environment every single day. Another note to consider when we're finding that sweet spot of when you're modeling with them or when you're narrating your daily life is to not talk quote unquote baby talk, right? So you want to simplify it. You as mom or dad or primary caretaker want it to be short and direct phrases so they are attending to the speech patterns because that's what's happening auditorily inside their brains, but that it's simplified, right? It's still not sophisticated language, and it could even be grammatically incomplete. So it's not incorrect, but it's incomplete. And so you would say you're looking at a car and you would say, oh, go car, vroom, and you push it along. And then you might expand upon that and say, the car is fast. The car goes fast. So you're stressing the car and fast, right? A quality. And then you expand a little bit more. The blue car goes very fast. Vroom, vroom. Blue car goes fast. Or if it crashed, you say blue car crash. And so you're stressing the key elements, and they're mapping, literally auditorily mapping your structure of each and every word and finding patterns so they're beginning to code your spoken language. And that's why it's important to model for them, to narrate and talk when you're doing something, when you're doing an action, whether it's a play with a car or changing their diaper or wiping their hands or picking a flower, that you're really giving voice to your environment. And so it's very, very important. And I've mentioned this before because this has always been my motto since I learned it, again, in the middle of the 1990s by a wonderful speech and language pathologist and neuroscientist, Dr. Marty Burns. But it was all about that we as human babies are born in this world as citizens of the world. We're ready to decode and learn any language. Your child and my child didn't know that it was going to speak English or French or German or, African click languages. It was physiologically ready to learn that. So their primary language starts to code based on what you and any primary caretaker shares with them. And that's why modeling and narration is very, very important. But it's that sweet spot. So let's put it in modern day context. We live in a very fast-paced, busy, active, go, go, go. We're always 5, steps behind our to-do list, right? We're highly distracted with electronic devices in and of themselves, but we're also overscheduled. We, especially in these last 2 or 3 years with the pandemic and all of that, we've kind of blurred our boundaries. And are we working? Are we at home? Am I a mom? Am I a professional? We've lost some of our routines and our structure. We're trying to gain our legs back and find a rhythm. But I don't think many of us have really found it yet. And it makes it very, very challenging for new moms to sit, to be quiet, to engage, to play, to talk, to sing, to be present. Smell the flowers, literally and figuratively, with your baby, your toddler, your preschooler. They've all been affected. I mean, I think each and every human has been affected. You and I both know that, but I'm here talking about the toddlers, the babies, the toddlers, and the preschoolers. It's really, really hard in this modern day to breathe, to stop, to be present, to help guide your child without 101 other things going on in your head, let alone in your near vicinity, in your home environment. So I'm here, this list, these are easy tips. They're really not hard to understand, but they're hard to implement on an everyday basis. So I want to encourage new moms, new parents of very young children, be mindful, be thoughtful, be cognizant of the pace of your day. Find out what kind of rhythm are you living day to day, and do I need to slow it down? There'll be times to speed it up and you'll have to, but are you getting enough time where it's just 1-to-1 or 1-to-2, where you really remove the background noise? And that includes music, TVs, news, people. You leave your phone on the other side of the door. Be present. Can you find some quiet time to just engage? And it's during those everyday routines, right? To go and say, whoops, I have to change your clothes. Let's go. Close the door. Take 5 minutes, 10 minutes. You can change their diaper and then read a book. Find activities, bath time, sharing a snack, to sit on the grass. If you have to wait for some, maybe a bigger child or a neighbor you're picking up, just sit on the grass and play with the grass, or a pile of sticks or some stones or pebbles, or, blow bubbles, whatever you have on hand. Make it easy. Make it connected. Make it purposeful. So we'll talk about in these 12 lists other things that we can use, that you can narrate and that you can model and help them listen to your speech, and then give them opportunity to practice back with you with approximated sounds to help them find that voice. So that just made me think about, using simple, direct language when they're very, very little in that first 18, 24 months. And do understand that speech and language processing, that's a term that we speech people use a lot, but processing, think of, the computer processor. And that we want to break it down and have those concrete nouns and verbs. And even at the same time, they're coding those individual sounds and understanding how certain sounds go together and certain sounds don't. One of the examples I always use in English is that ng, comes always at the end of a word, like sing and ring and bling, but never in the beginning. And so they have to code the patterns of our speech sounds. And so in those first 18, 24 months, it's very important that we give them time and opportunity to hear it and play with it. They, at the same time, are often listening to more sophisticated language. And I refer to it as kind of top down, bottom up, right? The top down is this bigger language, right? More sophisticated. They're overhearing conversations. We will talk to them in longer utterances and explain things not so concretely. And then you have those building blocks from the bottom up. But think of speech and language processing as this very intricate network that's being wired literally in their brain with every daily experience. And so those richer vocabularies can be learned later on, and as well as you'll see the grammatical markers, right? The differences between, kiss and kissing and eat and eating, or I will jump, I am jumping, I jumped. Those are all sophisticated language grammatical markers that will fall into place, but we have to build these basic building blocks to begin with. So that's where the sweet spot, don't just talk to your kids, no. they will get some of that, but they also need that one-to-one time. They also need that purposeful play, whether it's in the bathtub or you getting down on the floor and helping them with their blocks or their cars or their dolls or rocks or whatever it is, and helping them put the language to things and actions and feelings and descriptions on a very concrete basis. So look at like nouns, and then you have these verbs or action words, and then descriptions: big or blue, smooth, bumpy, yellow, empty, full. So you're building this rich vocabulary. And so by the time they hit that second birthday, that low average is 50 words, but high average is 200 words. And so you want your child to definitely be fitting in that range. And it's really, really important. And again, I've shared this before, that just because our world turned upside down doesn't mean that we just throw out our milestones. That is very, very, very important that all children reach these milestones as well as they can, given opportunity day in and day out to grow and learn and thrive in a loving, language-rich home environment. That's what it's all about. And so these 12 easy tips that you can use day in, day out to help increase your toddler's listening and talking should be in the forefront of your kind of routines. And another little side note on this is how important this whole modeling and narrative is that we as speech pathologists haven't always been the best models with this little tip. But it's important not to use the phrase, say this, say puppy, say monkey, say cup, say milk. That's not natural. That's not easygoing. That's not fun for them. It's certainly not fun for you, mom or dad. But we, speech pathologists and educators and, professional childcare providers, we're as guilty as anybody. And I still catch myself. So it's really important that you're engaged in the activity, whether it's, again, cleaning their diaper or washing their hands or sharing an apple or getting in and out of the car seat or taking a bath. You're doing something and putting language and context to that moment and help them, because when we're asking them in a drill-like format, they're not going to engage. There's no meaning, there's no heart and soul, and it's really, really, non-productive. So kids might repeat after you, but did they really acquire it? Did they really embrace that? And I always use the example that, and this is kind of a sexist statement, but in the sense that, husbands are often accused of regurgitating what they just heard, but they don't retain it. So they don't follow through with, say, picking up XYZ after school because they heard the words, but they didn't really embrace it and put it in their memory or their long-term storage. And so it's really important that we find true engagement with our toddlers and model with them and help them embrace and get excited about verbal communication. And that's really what I'm driving home. And one of the biggest takeaways about the whole 30 million word gap is that it's really about the quality, and it's about helping your child attend and listen to your words because it has meaning, and it's helping them learn and understand. And they get excited when they can do something and achieve, say they're putting blocks together, or say they're trying to, get their monkey inside the cupboard or whatever the activity is, and you're helping them with language. Like, oh, push again, push in it. Don't forget his foot if he wants to get inside the box. Put on the top, put on the top. That's it, that's it. Yay! And they're really excited because you're helping them verbally and behaviorally integrate their world. So number 2 of this list of 12 easy tips, again, they're easy or common tips, but they're not necessarily easy to implement, but they're not like cerebral or difficult number 2 is to put away the technology. And I know it's a very, very touchy subject. I don't think it's very controversial, but I do think it's very personal. And I will always come on this podcast. I will always share my truth, right? What I see, what I've learned. And I just want to come on here to encourage parents to find the courage to separate, especially in these early years, the very first, 3 years, but 5 or 6 years. That research is very, very consistent that there should be no technology under 2. And for, the American Pediatric Academy to come out and say that, that's pretty dang bold. But I always say under 3. And we know what the effects are, the negative implications to, affecting their attention, their ability to process sensory input, that they, giving them this dopamine hit that is like a drug, right? It's a visual and auditory. It really, really interferes with their ability to develop and acquire good, rich language. Remember, I'm talking about a language-rich environment. The human voice in live, real time codes your native language better than any computer-generated system. And we know this. We knew this 20 years ago when we used to look at studies of reading to kids either in the flesh, in live, or having the parents read the book and they watch it on a video. We know this. Can it be used as a supplement? Yes. Can it be used if a parent is traveling? Yes, of course. FaceTime is a little exception, but in the everyday, the language-rich environment, it's really, 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 really important that mom and dad get on the same page, first of all, that grandparents also embrace this, that you find your courage and you stand up and you say, you know what? It's only these first couple of years. I'm only going to have a baby for a little while, and my toddler's only going to be a toddler for a little while. I'm going to be in it with them. Yes, it's exhausting. Yes, it's overwhelming. Yes, oh my gosh, I had no idea, right? Until you're in it. But I cannot stress enough because it's become a slippery slope. We saw it happen, from 2006 to 2015, where just the iPhone was introduced. And now where you have technology at your fingertips 24/7. And even if you're pretty good with not letting your toddler see the device or use the device, but you're on it. And that's what I mean by when you do sneak away for these private moments, whether it's, changing or let's go have some quiet time, leave your device on the kitchen table. Turn it on airplane mode. Please recognize that your child can feel when you are and when you aren't present with them. They know that's what that human intuition, that human connection. You and I have all experienced it way more than we'd like to admit. When we sit down at the dinner table, or you go to meet your girlfriend, or you go to meet your guy friend, and they whip out their phone. They're looking, it's a half-assed conversation. You know how it feels. Please consider it when you're with your baby and your toddler. And yeah, you're going to have to look at it from time to time. I get that. But find that balance, find that sweet spot. Be honest with yourself, please, because our children will only grow and learn and develop with our nurturing, with our guidance, no matter what happens in a daycare center or preschool center, they need you. They need the family first and foremost. So just be purposeful, be cognizant, be honest. We're all in it together. It is not easy to navigate this world, this modern world. And it's not easy recovering and coming out of this pandemic. And I honestly am not okay with settling into this new normal. Sorry. Nope. They deserve more. You deserve more. We deserve more. We can do this. This is not that complicated. It's exhausting. It can be tiring. And it's not really easy, but it's not complicated either. So I wanted to start this list knowing that the first couple I'd have to dive deep into. I know that, modeling or narration can be confusing, and parents can over or undershoot what that means. I also know technology is a sensitive subject, but on that note, I also know that when we use terms like, in moderation, that becomes a very difficult way to measure, or a very difficult measure in and of itself. And it becomes this slippery slope, and it's sort of like everything in moderation. Well, us humans, we are a creature of habit, and it's really hard unless we stay present, unless we literally wake up every morning and say, okay, here's my boundary. This is what I want to do today. And you have to be purposeful. So I wanted to jump on here and start this fun list. It is a fun list, I swear, of these 12 easy tips to help increase your toddler's talking and listening. Because I go back, we lay this foundation. They become competent verbal communicators at 2 and 3 years old. And that's the foundation for all these other things to continue to grow and develop. Attention, self-regulation, social relationships, problem solving. All of these things are built upon early development. And I will talk a lot about motor and physical development as it interfaces or integrates, I guess is a better word, with speech and language. Because us human beings are very intricate systems of systems, and we can't tease it all apart. I talk a lot about speech and language here, but I talk about the whole child, and I'm talking about the whole parenting process and the whole family. They all go together. And so I just introduced the first two, right? That you have to model with them and find that sweet spot, talk with them, engage with them, be present, and then really on a daily basis, honestly, revisit what's your technology health, right? And how can I use it effectively for me as the adult, but keeping my baby, my toddler, my preschooler, my kindergartner away from it as much as humanly possible. So we'll continue to talk this. I know it's sensitive. I know it's hard, but you can do it. I know it's a choice. It's not easy choice, but you had courage enough to bring that beautiful child into this world. You can have courage enough to say, no, not now. they will have plenty of time to be on technology, I assure you. Okay, so with that, I thank you once again for spending your precious time, and I look forward to continuing this list of 12 of easy tips to help increase your toddler's talking and listening at home through everyday engagement. So don't forget to share with your friends and family if you're getting some good insight into these episodes. And wherever you listen to podcasts, go ahead and rate and write a review. That will help me boost my reach because it's important. New moms, new dads, you don't need to struggle. I'm here to help you find clarity, to build courage, to create a rich language home environment so your toddler thrives, not falls behind, not becomes a statistic, but truly thrives with your guidance. You can do this. Also, subscribe because I have some exciting news coming up in the next couple of months and I don't want you to miss out. I want you to get a reminder to go and listen. So thank you again. And I look forward to next week finishing this list and expanding your beautiful parenting skills. God bless. Take care. Bye.